Hey there, my name is Alex. I am the Silver Mont, and in this video we're gonna speculate over a terrifying prospect. Dark Souls, or Elden Ring, or Bloodborne, and so forth, being adapted into a TV show, or movie, or streaming show, whatever. The notion came to me the other day when I was trying to push the Wheel of Time's first season out of my brain, whilst working on something else Dark Souls related. I thought to myself, Wheel of Time's adaptation has been horrible so far. Who knows how the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power is going to turn out, but I'm not fancying my chances of enjoying it so far. So what other fantasy things am I into that Hollywood could absolutely butcher in the adaptation process? Dark Souls. In my opinion, Dark Souls does not need to be a movie or a TV show, and, well, frankly speaking, I don't think it even needed a sequel, but, I'm kinda glad it did get sequels. Still, what if it had to be done? How bad could it turn out? Indeed, could it possibly be done in a way that satisfies a new audience whilst not making the fans want to poop backwards? So we'll split this video into two parts. First, nightmare scenario of how an adaptation might actually play out, judging from recent adaptations. Second, I don't know, how we would, in theory, try and make it not suck, if we were being forced to make one for some reason. And of course, do let me know what you think down in the comments, what you would do if someone put a gun to your head and a lot of money in your hands and said, you make Dark Souls for TV or cinema. What if Netflix or Amazon or someone made an adaptation of Dark Souls? First things first, well, they need someone marketable, so they would absolutely want to hire at least one recognizable face they can stick in trailers and on posters saying, coming from Netflix, starring the dude or the girl you love. But, well, for that you need a main character, which brings us to our first question. Would a Dark Souls adaptation be loosely following the plot of the game, or would it be completely different? On the one hand, if you loosely follow the game, that would be cheaper in some areas because there would be a smaller cast. But if you, for example, had a Dark Souls show all set in a place like Anor Londo, then you can save on sets and locations. And the typical logic would be like this. Dark Souls is a game about exploration, delving the unknown and overcoming challenges. That's too difficult to convey in a show, right? So instead we need a more standard narrative. The way I see it, we would either get a show set in and around Anor Londo, with the cast being made up of Gwyn and his 4 knights and other retainers, or something that is closer to what we get in the game, that shows an undead breaking out of jail going on an adventure to limp the fire. Personally, I think they would go with the former, for several reasons. Less locations, easier to come up with a brand new plot, and you can make your own characters, and you have more characters to work with, and plenty of room to make stuff up, because we'd be going into a period not specifically covered by the game, only hinted at here and there. See, the thing I've come to realise about many adaptations is that the interest isn't in adapting something they love, it is using an established and popular franchise to launch their own careers, and of course to make money. If you own the rights to Lord of the Rings, then of course you're going to want to make money from Lord of the Rings. This is why you have shows like The Wheel of Time, which have only the loosest, vaguest resemblance to the source material, with character motivations, traits, and the like being drastically altered, usually for the worst, in completely nonsensical ways. I could go on a 30-minute tangent about the Battle of Tarwin's Gap, and how what they did in the show is so completely stupid and makes the whole series pointless, but I won't. Dark Souls, in a way, is perfect for this. The setting is so loose, so vague, that you have a built-in defense to use when your show gets bad reviews. When people say this is nothing like Dark Souls, people say this was our interpretation of events. If the game never outright said that Gwyn didn't have a secret son called Gwyntrosity who was actually behind everything, then you can't complain, because the game never said it didn't happen, right? So, we have a setting, Anor Londo. This would be the main backdrop for most of the series, and that would help keep location budgets down, because location budgets and sets, well, they cost a lot of money. And we only really need one famous actor, so that helps keep money down there too. But what are we going to do with the plot? Easy. Set it during the dragon hunts at some point, but make an emphasis on interpersonal conflicts between Gwyn's followers, something that we know very little about. Think about it. Gwyn, Gwyndolin, Guinevere, the firstborn, characters like Smo, this is a seedbed for writing potential. Cliffhangers, drama, and the like. Actual fighting against dragons would be kept to a minimum because CGI is expensive, especially when you're fighting a CGI monster. But as for main characters, well, Kieran seems like a shoo-in. As for whether they call her Kieran or Kiran, I don't know. It should be Lord's Blade Kieran, but there is cut dialogue of Hawkeye saying Kiran, so meh, whatever. Whilst we never actually saw her face, her voice actor from the game could easily play her in a series like this, and she's an established actor now. Interestingly enough, I think Kieran was her first ever acting role. It's the first that I could find when I was looking that stuff up ages ago. Now she's been in the MCU and other big films. Well, then we'd probably want Artorias as the male lead. He fits perfectly because he can be a rebel against the system while still being a good guy, ostensibly. You know, he's like, oh, I'm not going to play by the rules because the rules are wrong and I need to be good, and there? Gwyn's like, don't go to Ulasil, Artorias, that's against the rules, and Artorias is like, screw the rules, I'm Ryan Gosling. Just be prepared for him to never wear his helmet for 90% of the show. And yes, he probably would be played by Ryan Gosling or someone equally distracting. That leads to another point, actually. There's a big trend right now in Hollywood about having diverse casts and minority representation, all that sort of stuff, and considering we basically never see many characters due to them wearing helmets, well, they can do whatever they want casting-wise. They could cast Denzel Washington as Gwyn. In fairness, we do see Gwyn's face, but he looks like a pancake with 2 holes poked in it, so it doesn't really matter, they can do whatever they want. Now, I'm imagining if this situation became reality, then they would cast relatively unknown people, and they would still want to not have helmets on, because most actors are allergic to helmets, they want their face to be there, you know? Like in that Halo show, where Chief was played by some guy who I'm sure has a great career, but I'd never heard of him, and I feel like a lot of people had never heard of him, and he's like, no, Chief is not allowed to wear his helmet. Chief has to have his helmet off in 90% of scenes, because I want people to see my face. Even when I'm wearing the helmet, I want to have Iron Man shots inside the helmet of my face, screaming. Because, you know, when you think of Master Chief, you think of him screaming and punching things into bloody bits, don't you? That's exactly how I think of Master Chief. But you know what? Even trying to make something bad, I still made something that sort of resembles Dark Souls, alarmingly. Because the key to adaptations is to make it barely resemble the source material, and then get mad at people when they point that out. When you say, yeah, we hired experts on Dark Souls to make sure this is as accurate as possible, and then it comes out, and then it's as inaccurate as possible, and they're like, we wanted to do our own thing. We just lied to you to get you to watch it, because, I mean, screw you, quite frankly. Again, look at Halo. Superficially, Halo is a game about fighting aliens and saving the human race. I won't go beyond that, as I'm going to be honest, I never really paid attention to the themes of Halo, whether it's about the dangers of AI or whatever. I never paid attention, because I just like co-op shooting and ramming warthogs in tight places. But even on that superficial level, the show got it wrong. The Halo TV show is about interpersonal conflict between humans. Needless, constant drama. And, of course, repressed childhood memories and trauma, because it's the easiest thing to go to when you're writing. It's like saying, the main character's parents died. That is the easiest thing to do when you're writing. I wrote a really bad book when I was a teenager, and main character's parents died. There are so many easy tropes to go to when you're writing, and when you're doing a professional Hollywood adaptation, you want to use all of them, because people are stupid. People need to understand your stupid show with their stupid tiny brains. That's how Hollywood writers seem to interpret it. Either that, or they have tiny stupid brains themselves. I don't know. Either way, we need lots of pointless, stupid conflict and drama between people, preferably like family members. Gwyn would be absolutely perfect for this. You can present him as a bad guy. He's a big, powerful, old white guy who represents the patriarchy. Make allusions to Donald Trump, because that would absolutely be timely and have never been done before. It'd be great, you know? You'd be like, we're gonna make Anor Londo great again by killing all the dragons and building a wall. You know, they did build a big wall around Anor Londo, as a matter of fact. Another thing that writers love doing is taking modern issues and shoving them into any setting, no matter how inappropriate or jarring, usually in a very basic and pointless way. Like, take Star Trek Picard, which had lengthy segments dedicated to, effectively, ice are mean to immigrants, climate change is bad, without commenting on it beyond that. Which is like saying, having a character pop up and say, murder is bad, we should not kill people. Which is, funnily enough, that's more or less how that Captain Falcon and the Winter Falcon America show ended. Captain America, the new one, he popped up and he said, people should be good and not be bad, and politicians should make things better. I'm not kidding, that's basically how that speech went. It was embarrassingly bad. And that's like a multi-million-dollar production for you. Great. So we need some of these kind of like modern issues for the Dark Souls show, which is fortunately super easy. Barely an inconvenience, you might say. You can have, well, not racism, but you can have speciesism against dragons. Ornstein could be a particularly zealous, vicious killer of dragons who are actually noble, misunderstood creatures. You can go over transgender issues with Gwendolyn, despite it being wholly inappropriate given that character's whole story. But you know, if you look at it in the most basic level, you can go, aha, I can shove in some modern LBGT thing issues there. The important thing is that you look at everything through a modern lens. We have to apply 2022 sort of sensibilities to a setting with magic and dragons. We could absolutely have a ham-fisted comparison between the First Flame and global warming, for example, because that would make no sense, so we should do it. Amazing! It practically writes itself. Think about any hot topic going on in the world right now. You can absolutely shove it into a Dark Souls show, and I would fully expect that to happen because those are the only things worth talking about in fictional fantasy worlds. As for actual Dark Souls references, well, we'd have Artorias and Co in their armor, at least once, looking accurate to the games, which would be cool, you know, see some like real armor stuff, weapons. Beyond that, probably not so much. Sif would just be a normal dog. Do you remember in Game of Thrones where like for a while they were like trying to do stuff with the direwolves and then were like, no, just make them normal dogs and also write them out of the show because this is hard. Yeah, Sif would just be like a random husky dog. Maybe at one point you have Kieran quipping like, what are you doing, Artorias? Training Sif to hold a sword? We'd probably have loads of stupid quips and Marvel-like jokes in there because Dark Souls is known for its Marvel-esque humour and one-liners, as we are all aware. I don't know, maybe we also have a Taurus demon show up to attack Anor Londo because Taurus demons are from the game. The demons and dragons would probably be aligned, despite that making no sense. We'd need something insane like that, but you could easily go 8 to 12 episodes. Maybe multiple seasons. Cliffhangers every episode. I've made myself sad thinking about that. So let's move on. And if we had to make a good Dark Souls adaptation, if we had to try with all our hearts, not caring about money or our own careers or whatever people care about when they butcher things like this, if it had to be made, what would be the best way to go about it? Now, when you think about an adaptation, in my eyes, you should be transferring elements from one surface to another. Let's say you really loved burgers, but you became a vegetarian or a vegan, so you might go for one of those meat-free burgers or whatever they're called. Reasonably, you would expect this meat-free burger to have a taste, smell, texture that puts you in mind of the original product, the meat product, the beef burger. If you bought a meat-free burger and it was just a ball of Play-Doh between two buns made out of sand, you would reasonably be upset. And if you were the person selling that, you would have no position to stand on in your defense, because you're a douchebag. We want to take as many of the elements from Dark Souls, the game, as we can and work them into the show, which is of course hard. It's such a game experience that Dark Souls is just not suited for this sort of adaptation. Though I do have an idea and even a model. There's a fairly recent movie, actually, which is the basis for this model. I actually made a video about it last year or so, The Green Knight. If I were to make a Dark Souls show or movie, I think a movie would be the way to go, or a short series of around, 4 to 6 episodes, but honestly, I think a movie would work better. See, Dark Souls is all about immersion. A movie is easier to immerse yourself in, as you don't really have as many thoughts about the next episode, the next season, or whatever. It's just what is in front of you in the theatre. You lose yourself in that experience. I would also follow the plot of the game, although a truncated version. Yes, I would keep a mostly silent character. I don't know whether the Chosen Undead needs to be completely silent, like a mute, or not, but I think for the most part, it can work with them being silent. Because if you think about it, the Chosen Undead doesn't really need to speak that much. They just need to be the catalyst for the viewer, the eyes of the viewer. You are seeing the world through the eyes of the Chosen Undead. Now, of course, you have to wonder, well, why do we want to root for this character? You don't need to be rooting for them. They are just, as mentioned, like a camera. You are experiencing this journey with them. Whether you want them to fail or succeed is in some ways irrelevant, because that's not the point. The point is just to experience the journey. I would have it start off with the Chosen Undead being in the asylum, being rescued by Oscar. The main difference is that I would keep Oscar alive a little longer. Instead of dropping the body with the key in, he would be passing the cells and he would unlock it. Then the undead and Oscar would move through the asylum. Maybe we start with Oscar. It starts from his perspective, maybe. Oscar gives us some exposition. There's an old saying in my family. Thou who art undead art chosen. In thine exodus from the undead asylum, maketh pilgrimage to the land of ancient lords, Lordran. When thou ring the bell of awakening the fate of the undead, thou shalt know. I think that's what he says, but maybe I paraphrased a little bit, but he would effectively say that. We can do the little bait and switch too, where Oscar is presented maybe as the main character, the protagonist, until he's promptly squished by the asylum demon. I'm of two minds as to whether or not the Chosen Undead should take Oscar's armor and weapon, or just find his own later, but I do kinda like the idea of him taking Oscar's stuff. Beyond that, we'd get a truncated version of the game's, well, timeline, I guess, the locations. Lots of walking, landscape shots, fantastical things. That's why I said to use the Green Knight as a model, as that is the nearest thing I can think of, once he sets out on his journey. Having the themes and the kind of feeling of Dark Souls on the screen. It's very visual with lots of audio cues. We don't really need lots of dialogue and character motivation and stuff like that. It's more about what you are seeing and hearing. We can of course bring in other characters now and then, but we only need the important ones, and the real question is, where do we end it? But I'm sure you can imagine how terrifying something like Frampton Carth might work if the undead is floating in a seemingly pitch black space that goes on forever, when suddenly that stinky serpent shows up. I think it's simple enough though. We don't even really need much of a fight against, like, Gwyn. He could already be dead when the undead shows up. Ha! Dead when the undead shows up. And we just end with the Chosen Undead sitting in front of the fire, leaving it ambiguous as to whether or not he's going to link it or not. We don't really need much fighting in general, to be honest. Sen's Fortress could have a fun action set piece against the golem. Maybe instead of like knocking the golem off the bridge, maybe, you know, the undead makes it get hit by one of the traps in the fortress. And I like the idea of the undead being able to see the reflections and echoes from bloodstains. They don't need to explain it, just show some like ghostly figures walking into a trap. And then the undead knows, oh, there's a trap here, and he will avoid it in that manner. The bloodstains will let him avoid the traps, maybe give him an idea of how to fight the golem. If we're talking changes though, I think realistically we could stick to just having the one Bell of Awakening. There's a lot of areas that wouldn't really need to be put in, and we wouldn't really need any of the Ulasil or DLC stuff. As cool as it is, don't get me wrong, I love Ulasil. I personally don't think it would serve the overall narrative that well in this context, because it's kind of a bit of a side story, even though it ties in very well with the main plot. So loosely speaking, Asylum, Firelink Shrine, through the forest to reach the Bell of Awakening, this would probably be the biggest change here. Sen's Fortress, Anor Londo, New Londo, maybe Tomb of the Giants, Ash Lake, Kiln. I know that cuts out quite a lot of areas, but I think that would give a nice sort of flow, whilst also showing some of the coolest areas, the most Dark Souls-y ones. Now here's another big potential change. I think after Anor Londo, you know, in the game, you go to Anor Londo, then they go here, go here, go here, go here, get the Lord Souls, blah, blah, blah. Realistically, in a movie, we can combine all of those into get one Lord Soul. Combine New Londo with the Tomb of the Giants, maybe, for the purposes of the plot. You can say, oh, the four kings are in the Tomb of the Giants. I know people might think, oh, that's a travesty, you're like changing everything, but there are ways to wrangle it where I think that would make sense. Because you need to truncate that second half somehow, and I think that would be a good way to do it. Whether it's the Four Kings or Nito or whatever, just go to the Tomb of the Giants, which is combined with New Londo into, you know, just say it used to be a city, now it is just a tomb. Gather the remnants of the souls. Then we have Karth show up in this dark abyss, maybe sends the undead to Ash Lake, because we need Ash Lake. It's too cool not to include. Ash Lake is irrelevant in the game in a lot of ways, so we need to come up with a reason. Maybe Karth says, see the truth of the world, or the only way to the kiln is through Ash Lake. He wouldn't say that, but he would say, I will show you the way to the kiln. And frankly, I think reaching the kiln through Ash Lake would be fine. I know normally we just go from Firelink Shrine, and you might be thinking, well, Firelink Shrine, the clue is in the name, but, you know, it's fine. We can always go, you know, Karth goes back to Firelink Shrine, or rather he sends Throws Undead back to Firelink Shrine, and then there's like a secret passage that goes to Ash Lake, and then from Ash Lake to the kiln. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Maybe once you're in Ash Lake, you have to jump through a portal in the water, like a reflection, and that takes you to the kiln. Kind of like the intro for Dark Souls 2, which was kind of cool. And honestly, we can probably remove Seath entirely. Don't get me wrong, it's cool, the Crystal Caves are cool, but I think if we had to cut things, you could cut Seath pretty easily. That or make him the obstacle to overcome in Anor Londo, kind of combining Anor Londo with the Duke's Archives, but either way you'd either want Seath or Ornstein and Smo. Because in terms of like action scenes, well, we need like one big creature, the Iron Golem could work for that, a human-sized enemy, we have plenty of options for there, from invaders to Black Knights and so on. Solaire could show up as a supporting character who gives us a little more exposition here and there. Although that might need to be changed up from the game a little bit. He could explain Anor Londo, though, and say stuff like, you know, for centuries they've tried and failed to reach it, taking some of the dialogue from the Crestfallen Merchant. It'd be really easy to explain Solaire coming and going, too. Our worlds are aligned, but briefly. And that would also explain why the Chosen Undead is seeing ghosts and phantoms and maybe invaders. It would be kind of cool to have at least one invader show up, especially if it was like one using a very famous build. Patches would be fun, though I'm of two minds as to whether Patches would work or not in a film like this. We would definitely need the voice actor to play Patches though. But you have Solaire show up for Ornstein and Smo, and maybe for the ending in some capacity. Maybe we get a reflection of him fighting Gwyn in the background, I don't know. Of course, there's loads of fun and colourful NPCs who would be hard to fit into this, but I think that's okay. It would help the themes of desolation and loneliness. We would want a pretty small cast. Most of the movie would be centered around the mostly silent protagonist, his reactions and interactions with a savage, beautiful, mysterious, dark fantasy world. Lots of room to polish up, of course. This is like completely off the top of my head, spur of the moment stuff. One that hopefully doesn't ever need to come to fruition. But hey, if someone in Hollywood wants to pay me to write a script treatment for Dark Souls, go ahead. I mean, I will do it for free if it stops someone from making some awful other horrible thing. What do you think, though? If you had to adapt Dark Souls for TV or cinema, what would you do? How would you go about it? Live action, CGI, animated, animation, cartoon, anime, whatever. Maybe you want a radio drama. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments.